lobbies, please take your seats and turn your phones up and we'll have a good day. No interruptions. The title we've got Mark Devlin, and he's going to be talking about his new book, Musical Truth, Volume 3. Over to you, Mark.
Well, thank you. Thanks everyone for turning out today. Hopefully it's going to be a meaningful and fulfilling session. As Maureen mentioned, I'm going to be presenting content from my upcoming book, Musical Truth Volume 3. I am capping these books at a trilogy because the danger is that I would spend the rest of my life writing Musical Truth books and I'd get up to volume however many more years I've got left. So I did want to put the lid on it with this book. It has been necessary with Volume 3 to address a lot of non-music related scenarios for obvious reasons. I've addressed the Convid scandemic and I've gone into great detail to show how the entire narrative of Convid is fraudulent in each and every way. I know we all know this, but it's my hope with the book that many people will gift it to a friend or a family member who has yet to wake up to harsh, uncomfortable truths. And I've tried to put everything between the covers of this book that anyone could ever need to show them that that entire agenda was designed to lead to genocide and human enslavement, that kind of thing. So I do get into how this ties into the music industry because ultimately the same parties that have pulled off this trick are the parties that also control the entertainment industry and pull the strings of the key players in the music industry. And also in the book I go into the reactions of many prominent musicians to what's been going on the past couple of years. For the most part, as you'll probably be aware, most of those that have spoken out have merely reinforced the official narrative. They've got out there, they've told all their fans and followers to put on their masks, do what the government tells you, take the vaccine, right on script. I call these individuals out in the book, publicly shame them for their treason and their treachery. I also give honorary mentions to the very small number of music makers who have spoken out about what's happening. They've spoken out about the tyranny, they've exposed all the lies and all the deceptions. It doesn't take long, it doesn't fill many pages, because basically we're talking Van Morrison, Eric Clapton, Ian Brown, Right Said Fred. There's been some unexpected names emerging, speaking out about this tyranny. Right Said Fred is one. There's a few others. There's Baby D of Let Me Be Your Fancy fame. There's Danny Rampling, the DJ. There's a few other names from the dance music field. But for the most part, we're talking, those individuals. And it's pretty shameful. It's pretty disappointing. But what I'm going to be presenting today is excerpts from sections in the book which are titled Sound Bites. And this is getting back to many of the subjects that were addressed in volumes 1 and 2. And just kind of reinforcing those points with short, snappy little stories. And these punctuate the main chapters, so where you're going to be reading about Convid and social engineering and how all the mind control and the propaganda was pulled off, you next get one of these sound bites chapters, and they kind of break up the flow of the main chapters just to give some other interesting subjects. So I'm presenting some of these excerpts today for the first time, so we'll see how that goes. I've selected 5 stories for you, which I think translate very well into public presentations. So let's get into the first one. If I showed you the sleeve to the Smiths' single Panic, which came out in 1986, would anyone know where I might be going with this in terms of an alternative meaning that could be applied to the lyrical content of this particular song? That's good. I like that nobody knows where this is going because it'll be a complete surprise to you, and hopefully we'll have some jaws on the floor by the end of the session. So we're talking Panic, and here are some of the lyrics from this song. It goes, burn down the disco, hang the blessed DJ, because the music that they constantly play, it says nothing to me about my life. Hang the blessed DJ. And then it goes on to say, on the Leeds side streets that you slip down, provincial towns that you jog round, hang the DJ, hang the DJ, hang the DJ. So the official explanation for the lyrics to Panic were given in an interview by guitarist Johnny Marr at the time. And he said what inspired it was he was listening to Radio 1 in spring 1986, and they just put out a news bulletin about the Chernobyl nuclear disaster coming out of Russia. And they were talking about how devastating that was and all the loss of life. And he said straight after this news bulletin, DJ Steve Wright comes in and introduces a song by Wham. He's like, hey, it's Radio 1 and here's Wham, I'm your man. And Johnny Marr just thought it was so distasteful to come out of a serious news bulletin like that and just go into this crappy, cheesy song, you know. And he said that's what inspired the idea of Hang the Blessed DJ, because the music they constantly play says nothing to me about my life. So there's the official story of how these lyrics came around. But there is an alternative conspiracy theory which is built up around Panic, suggesting it may be all about Jimmy Savile, and that he may well be the DJ in question. Particularly as the song goes, Hang the Blessed DJ, Savile was blessed by the Pope. Among the various accolades that he picked up, including being knighted by the Queen twice, he was blessed by the Pope and became a blessed DJ. And so there's a very strong suspicion that this song may have been about Savile, and the sentiments Hang the DJ, when it comes to him, are probably ones that many of us share. But we only found out about Savile's crimes and his true nature in 2012. So it's been 9 years. He died 10 years ago, just before his birthday, on Halloween, appropriately enough. That's when Savile was born, same year as the Queen. And we only got his true nature exposed in 2012. So this was back in 1986. Is it possible that Morrissey, Johnny Marr and the Smiths had inside knowledge of what Savile was up to going way back then? This is a picture of the Smiths for the Queen is Dead album, one of their promotional pictures. It's outside a building in Manchester called Salford Lads Club. It's a very iconic historic building out in Manchester. Savile had a history with Salford. He was based there for a period in the 1960s when Top of the Pops first kicked off on BBC One in 1964. It was coming out of Salford, Manchester, and Savile was the key presenter that was based in Salford at the time. So some people wonder whether the Smiths posing outside Salford Lads Club at the time that Panic was released may have been some sort of subtle clue for those that might have been able to decipher it. Going back to the sleeve for Panic, it featured the face of a little-known American actor whose name was Richard Bradford. So again, it's led some researchers to question whether this may have been a subtle clue as to Savile's connection with Bradford. Savile came from Leeds, but you know, he spent some time in Bradford and had a connection to that city, and it's one of the places that he used to go to jog around and get close to children. Now, here we have the video. All right, we'll start that again. So we've got an alternative video to Panic to show you here. There was an official video, and then there was a second version that was put together by a New Zealand-based filmmaker called Derek Jarman. And his version contained lots of different imagery to the original video, and this becomes the interesting one to study. So let's have a look at some excerpts to Derek Jarman's alternative video to Panic.
In the
So we've got a lot there. And the lyric, I wonder to myself, will life ever be sane again, has been playing on my mind quite a lot lately. So, examining some of the images that we have here, it's very quick fire, there's a lot of subliminals going on, straight into the subconscious mind. We've got images of the House of Commons and Parliament and Buckingham Palace. Buckingham Palace going up in flames. What could that mean? We'll come back to the House of Commons thing. We've got young children dancing around at the end. Could that be a clue being communicated? We've got a man kissing a skull, which could be interpreted as a subtle reference to necrophilia, which we now know Jimmy Savile was into. He volunteered as a night porter at Leeds General Infirmary, where he worked in the mortuary, and this got him access to dead bodies. And it was Paul Gambaccini, the BBC Two DJ, that went public in a mainstream interview and stated that Savile had been into necrophilia. So do we have some foreknowledge of all of this being encoded into this Derek Jarman video? Jarman died at the relatively young age of 52 in 1994, reportedly of an AIDS-type illness. He comes from a military family background as well, which might be worth mentioning, because when you look into backgrounds of many prominent musicians, you find connections through their fathers into expressions of the military. And Derek Jarman's father was involved in the New Zealand Air Force. Coming back to the idea of the House of Commons, though, we come on to John Lydon, aka Johnny Rotten, of Sex Pistols fame. So, Lydon in 1978 made a comment to an interviewer that suggested he knew what Jimmy Savile was up to. So he said he'd like to kill lots of people. There are many people he'd like to kill. He was kind of half joking. But he said, I'd like to kill Jimmy Savile. I bet he's into all kinds of sordid stuff that we're not allowed to talk about. Years later, he appeared on Piers Morgan's chat show, and they replayed that clip. And Morgan was praising Lydon for speaking out at the time. Not that many people got to hear that clip. But it does suggest inside knowledge on the part of John Lydon of what Savile was up to back in 1978. And as I mentioned in the presentation I did last night, there were many BBC presenters who, when the true nature of Savile was revealed, came out and made comments like, well, of course, yeah, we all kind of knew about it. It was like a best-kept secret within the corporation, but you just knew not to talk about it. Everyone just kept their mouths shut. So, another interesting point about John Lydon is that in his autobiography, Anger is an Energy, he revealed that he had attended kinky sex parties in the House of Commons with various well-known MPs. So the question becomes, what the hell was he doing there? How did he get access to these parties? And we come back to the image that was in that video of the House of Commons and Parliament and Buckingham Palace, because we have some connections going into the royals. Jimmy Savile was a close personal confidant of Prince Charles and Prince Philip. He was brought in as a marriage advisor, supposedly, when Princess Diana and Prince Charles's marriage was on the rocks. I mean, who else would you call but an aging DJ in a shell suit, you know, to come and advise on your marriage? So there's many connections going into royalty there. And of course, Savile was knighted by the Queen twice. He was a Sir. He had many other accolades, Knight of Malta and all kinds of other dubious honours. Going back to the lyrics, panic on the streets of London, panic on the streets of Birmingham. I wonder to myself, could life ever be sane again? The Leeds side streets that you slip down. So Savile was from Leeds. And there is an interesting story or idea that's been put forward by Thomas Sheridan, the Irish researcher, who got into the subject of Savile shortly after his death. And Sheridan noted the connection between Savile and Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper. So they were friends, and Savile visited Sutcliffe in Broadmoor Mental Hospital many times, introduced him to Frank Bruno, incidentally. Frank Bruno turned up at Savile's funeral, and he's there alongside DJ Mike Reid from BBC Radio 1. And Bruno commented that Savile had helped him in all kinds of ways that he can't talk about on the television. So what the hell did he mean by that? So Savile was connected to Peter Sutcliffe, and one of the Yorkshire Ripper's victims, Irene Sutter, her name was found very close to the part of Leeds where Savile had a home, Roundhay Park in Leeds. So this led Sheridan and others to speculate on whether Savile could actually have been an accomplice of Sutcliffe when it comes to some of these murders. It's something we can't rule out. So back to the lyrics, the Leeds side streets that you slip down, that could certainly apply to Savile. Panic on the streets of London, panic on the streets of Birmingham. He got around a bit. He ran a lot of marathons. And the charity work that he did was a cover, a smokescreen for what he was really up to. It got him close to children. You know, he worked at Stoke Mandeville Hospital in Aylesbury in the spinal injuries unit, where he would visit kids who were bedridden and couldn't move. He volunteered at Leeds General Infirmary, as I mentioned, and many other places that got him close in the vicinity of children. He had access all areas at Broadmoor Mental Hospital. He was able to go wherever he wanted in that place, and apparently he even had his own room where he would stay and sleep there. So he was very well connected, and lots of people must have known what he was up to all these decades, that he got away with it, literally, right up to his death. So hopes may rise on the Grasmere, but honey pie, you're not safe here. What the hell could that mean? Why Grasmere when you mentioned London and Birmingham and all these other places? Well, I dug out this story concerning this guy. I forget his name, I think his name is in the next slide. Paul Evans. Jailed for 20 years after a string of attacks on young girls. So he's a paedophile. And in this story, if we go down to the very bottom paragraph, we find Evans of Grasmere Avenue, Paddingham, admitted 2 offences of rape, sexual assault of a child under 13, causing a child to watch a sexual act. In the second half of this talk, things get a bit happier. I just wanted to let you know, we're on a lighter note, because this isn't the happiest material to get into, is it? But I hope you'll still find it compelling. So this guy, his address was Grasmere Avenue. Could that be a reference in the song? Worth considering. The last line, but honey pie, you're not safe here. What could that mean? PI stands for the Paedophile Information Exchange. And it's a platform that was set up to allow paedophiles to communicate with each other. There are connections with Harriet Harman, the MP, who spoke out in support of PI at one point. But could the lyric, honey pie, you're not safe here, refer to those that use this service, PI, communicating with each other and possibly giving each other warnings about stay away from this area, or, you know, there's a bit of heat here, they're onto you, so tone it down a bit. Honey pie, you're not safe here. Worth considering again. Now we get into a very interesting connection going back into the royals, and it involves Princess Diana and the TV show Spitting Image. And because there's so much to remember here, and this is the first time I've done this talk, I've had to include the section of the book on this to remind me how it all fits in, because it's quite complex. So the 1980s TV satire Spitting Image once included a sketch that featured Savile, the Smiths, and Princess Diana. This doesn't tie in directly to the wider story that the Smiths themselves revealed the truth about Savile, but it does provide another public connection between the group and Savile. And it also ties into the British royals, as Savile is said to have been retained as a counsellor to Prince Charles and Princess Diana when their marriage was on the rocks, as I just mentioned. The ruse for the sketch was that a member of the public had written into Savile's Jim'll Fix It show, What's in a Name, asking for him to play a Smiths song, but to arrange for someone other than Morrissey to sing it. So Savile recruits Diana to sing it instead. The song turns out to be, for no apparent reason, the band's Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now. These are all synchronistic connections. Everything just ties together and leads off in all kinds of different directions. And this sort of scenario, which I've come across so many times, leads me to wonder whether this is even possible as the product of human planning, or if what we're talking about here is metaphysical forces that are causing all these things to happen and to connect in, because there's just so much there. An odd side note to this is that the Smiths only ever played one concert on the day of Diana's death, 31st of August. This was in 1986, when they performed just outside Phoenix, Arizona. They're credited as having played just 2 songs in their set that night: Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now and Panic. So to recap, it pays to. In the early 90s, Spitting Image brought the strange combination of Morrissey, Diana and Savile together for a spoof version of Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now. The Smiths are widely considered to have revealed the truth about Savile in their single Panic, and the band performed both songs and no others exactly 11 years before Diana's untimely death. And this kind of thing is why I say it can't all be the product of human planning. There are other forces conspiring to make all this stuff happen the way it does. So that's the first story. I hope you found that one interesting. We've got another one in part 1, then we're going to take a break, then I've got 3 stories in part 2. So the second story in this part concerns Kate Bush. Lots to say about Kate Bush. Just as a matter of interest, who is a fan of Kate Bush or has enjoyed her music over the years? Okay, I'd say that's the majority of the audience. Me too, I think.
We'll be wrong.
No, the music's great. The music of all these groups is great. It's just what lies beneath. So I'm a big fan of Kate Bush. I think her music's been incredible. You know, she's described as an original one-off. There's nobody like her. Many artists have tried to mimic her, but she was the original, and she was incredibly creative. What might have led to that creativity, and what might have led to some of the lyrical content of her songs and some of the symbolism that's appeared in her videos, is the big question. There's very little known about her family background. So her mother, Hannah, who came from Ireland, was a nurse. Her father, I think his name was Robert Bush, was a doctor. He appears here in blurred form. This is the only video or picture that I was able to find of Kate Bush's father. And this is a video where she's just found fame with her first single, and she's being interviewed in the back garden of their place in East Wickham, Kent. And her mum and dad are there. But you get a very blurry image of her dad, and he doesn't say a whole lot. And Kate appears very shy. She's very awkward. She doesn't have a lot of confidence. She's very different to how she appears on stage, where she just seems to come alive and step into these different personas. We've experienced that many times before in the music industry. So there's very little known about her dad, other than he was a doctor. You look at any biography of Kate Bush, and it will tell you her father was a doctor. but it never goes into what kind of doctor he was and what sort of subjects he may have specialised in. So my guess is that he was involved in mind control research of the MKUltra variety. And my speculative guess is that Kate was put into that program and received MKUltra style mind control programming, and that is what is responsible for the many different personas that she displayed on stage, in public performances, in videos, and we'll get into some of that. This is her at a very young age. She's said to have taught herself piano by the age of 11, and she'd written a whole host of songs by the age of 13, so she was a child prodigy in that regard when it comes to musical ability. She's said to have been discovered and put on the map by Dave Gilmour of the group Pink Floyd. So he's said to have happened across a demo tape of some of her songs, and he was so impressed that he arranged for her to go to EMI Studios in London, the studios where the Beatles famously recorded, and he got her into some studio sessions with Jeff Emerick, who had been the engineer on many Beatles recordings. So, what a lucky break, eh? How many young girls that write songs get a break like this, you know? A key member of one of the most prominent rock groups at the time gets you into a recording session with one of the most legendary engineers that's worked with the most famous group in music history. So it seems to me that there was some behind-the-scenes engineering going on there to ensure that she got put in with the right people very early on. We got Kate's single, The Man with the Child in His Eyes. Interesting imagery on the sleeve to the single. You've got the one eye, and you've got the illumination coming there with a picture of a young Kate. She's said to have written this song at the age of 13. And in the lyrics, it talks of this figure, this spirit maybe, this man, that appears in her bedroom late at night when she's 13. So we can draw all kinds of conclusions there. It could be that it's the manifestation of some kind of spirit, because she certainly got into supernatural and metaphysical themes. Or it could be something more sordid. Either way, in interviews, Kate has claimed that The Man with the Child in His Eyes was written about this guy by the name of Steve Blackmore, who is said to have been her boyfriend. I don't know if he was her boyfriend when she was 13 or when she was older. She was certainly older when the single was released in 1980. So Steve Blackmore himself, in interviews, has said, yes, it was me, I'm the man with the child in his eyes. And he went on to have quite a prolific career. He became a music producer, he became a presenter. This is how I remember him in the mid-80s. He was a presenter on MTV. And he opened a couple of very successful clubs in London. So he's done very well for himself off the back of being credited as the subject for that single. The breakthrough single for Kate was Wuthering Heights. It's an incredible piece of music. I still get goosebumps every time I hear it because it's just like nothing else you've ever heard. It seems to have an otherworldly, supernatural quality to it as far as I'm concerned. But on the single sleeve to this, we have Kate in what appears to be a mock crucifixion. And this is the first of many sleeves where we have all kinds of spiritual and esoteric and religious themes being displayed. I think the next thing is a video. Yes, it is. So I'll just play you this. This is the alternative video to Wuthering Heights. So there were two videos released at the time the song was put out. The most famous video has her in a white ballerina's dress in an interior location, dancing around. But there was an alternative version, directed by Kate herself, which was featuring her in a red dress in an outside location, again, dancing around. So we'll have a little look at this, and then we'll go some more into the location of this video.
I'm a 50 boy.
So right from the off there with her first single, which became a big hit, we've got supernatural themes, because this is drawing on the Bronte story Wuthering Heights, and she's assuming the role of Cathy, appearing at the window of Heathcliff at Wuthering Heights, and she's a ghost, she's a spirit. So this marked Kate's fascination with these themes, which we see in many of her songs. She's in the red dress there, that makes me think of the woman in the red dress in The Matrix, and various other connotations of the red dress. But the interesting thing about this location where the video was shot is it's known as Baden's Clump, not Biden's Clump, that's something different altogether. And it's on Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire. So it's very close to Stonehenge, and it's close to Lark Hill Military Camp, which is on Salisbury Plain as well. So was it just pure coincidence that the video was shot there, or is there some kind of connection into that military base and into Stonehenge as an ancient mystical site? You often find military bases located at sites associated with paranormal or mystic activity for some reason. Moving on to her single Sat in Your Lap, the sleeve becomes quite interesting because she's holding a globe in her hand, and she has a dunce's hat on her head. A dunce's hat was used to denote idiots, fools, people that can't think properly. And she's holding a globe. Wonder what could be getting conveyed there, inside knowledge. In many of her videos and pictures, she employs what is known as the 1,000-yard stare. It's this look that she's got in her eyes where she seems to be dissociating from reality. She doesn't seem to be taking in what's going on. We can find ourselves drifting into that kind of state. I do it a lot when I'm driving. I can find that I've covered 10 miles and I have no recollection of any detail of those 10 miles that I've just driven. So I've kind of gone into this altered state. And the 1,000-yard stare is associated with mind control programming, where subjects slip into these different alters, these different personas that have been created as a result of what's been done to them. So we just see this a lot with Kate, and I find it quite interesting. We've got it here on an album sleeve. She just looks like she's somewhere else, like she's, you know, slipped into some altered state. So more on Sat in Your Lap. We just saw the sleeve to it. The lyrics become very interesting to analyse. Sat in Your Lap hints at an initiate to an occult mystery school seeking to obtain advanced knowledge, but finding that the process is a struggle and is the preserve of only a select few. We appear to be getting an insight into the concept of satanic inversion and Orwellian doublespeak too, with the line, "Some say that heaven is hell, some say that hell is heaven." Puts me in mind of Jimmy Savile's catchphrase actually, "Now then, now then." Now and then, they're polar opposites. Orwellian doublespeak, satanic inversion. Then, the following line appears to represent a mockery of those who think they can achieve high status and top-level employment without having first obtained secret societal knowledge through association. Could we be getting clues as to some of Kate's own fraternal connections, truth in plain sight style, as a result of her family background? I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a scholar, but I really can't be bothered. Oh, just gimme it quick. Gimme, 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 gimme. It's a bit like the journey we go through ourselves in life, I suppose, where, you know, we've come here to learn lessons and undergo experiences, and we just have to plow through it and, you know, undergo those processes. And sometimes we can find ourselves wanting to fast track it and just get to the end without having to do all this work. Maybe that's just me, I feel that way often, but I can certainly relate to the sentiments of this song. Then we have more heavy stuff coming through the lyrics to Them Heavy People. from Kate's debut album, The Kick Inside. And The Kick Inside, that title was said to represent a baby inside a mother's stomach wanting to come out and get into the world. So that's the kick inside, that's what that is. Several lines speaking of the process of humans reconnecting with their divine nature while in bodily form, like every one of us has a heaven inside. They open doorways that I thought were shut for good. We humans got it all, we perform the miracles. We also appear to be back to the dissociation caused by lifelong trauma-based mind control, however, and the thin line between torture and ecstasy, with lines like, I was hiding in a room in my mind. That speaks to these different alters that are created through the mind being shattered as a result of being exposed to extreme trauma. That's how this mind control works. Fritz Springmeier has done lots of work on this, in exposing how mind control and satanic ritual abuse is employed within the top echelons of society and in entertainment. And then they build up my body, break me emotionally, it's nearly killing me, but what a lovely feeling, that thin line between pleasure and pain. Okay, another video here. This is for a song called Lily, and it was from Kate's Red Shoes album. There was a promotional video recorded for it as part of a longer sequence, directed by Kate herself, and this one is absolutely packed with symbolism, so let's have a look at it. Just me, or was all that rather dark and disturbing? Not really my idea of entertainment, to be honest. That video featured Lindsay Kemp, who was a mime artist, and he was a mentor to David Bowie in his very early days. And it features a whole load of other stuff as well. So to put some interpretation on it, this is, again, from my book, explaining the whole context of it. The album songs include Lily, as well as possibly referencing Lilith. The Jewish Kabbalah teaches that the demon, Lilith, preceded Eve as the first woman and as Adam's first wife, but Lilith managed to disappear from the Garden of Eden. Lily is also a nickname for Elizabeth, the Queen, being privately nicknamed Lilibet, and is a known incantation ritual in witchcraft and satanic practices. The official story is that the song was inspired by the late Lily Cornford, Kate's friend and personal healer, who, Kate said, believed in the powers of angels and taught me to see them in a different light. The lyrics contain a large part of an incantation known as the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram, and is described on Wikipedia as a ceremonial magic ritual devised and used by the original Order of the Golden Dawn. The three founders, William Robert Woodman, William Wynne Westcott, and Samuel Liddell Mathers, were Freemasons. Surprise, surprise. Aleister Crowley was also a prominent member. The principal components of the Kabbalistic cross and the LBRP are drawn from the works of French occultist Eliphas Levi, the creator of the hermaphroditic Baphomet archetype. So, Agadoo it is not. Kate put out a song called Sealed in Gaffer. Interesting. The video to which starts off with her in a barn with chains seen hanging from the beams. Interesting to note, it may be neither here nor there, but Fiona Barnett and Jeanette Archer, who were two survivors of satanic ritual abuse from Australia and Britain, respectively, have spoken of being kept captive in barns and being chained up there. So we should factor that in to why this image might be in the video. Kate's doing the one eye sign in this, which we see with so many other artists. And her own mother appears at the end of the video to comfort her after she's been through all kinds of trauma. This is Hannah, her mother, making a cameo. Other songs. The subject of pedophilia has also crept into Kate's lyrics, albeit with plausible deniability attached. So her song, The Infant Kiss, is said to have been inspired by the gothic horror movie, The Innocents, itself adapted from the Henry James novel, The Turn of the Screw. The story concerns a governess who believes the spirit of her dead lover is trying to reach her through the children she looks after. Hence the lyrics, I say goodnight, I tuck him in tight, but things are not right. What is this? An infant kiss that sends my body tingling. I've never fallen for a little boy before. No control. There are many artists in the industry that could do a cover version of that. The Red Shoes, this was the title of one of Kate's albums. Some of you may have heard of the concept of the Red Shoe Club, which is pretty horrific stuff. It's tied into the adrenochrome industry, and the idea is that the blood of children who are sacrificed within that scenario goes into the construct of shoes, red shoes. And we see many celebrities and famous people often out there parading themselves in red shoes, notably the Pope, who seems to love them. This is Never Forever, one of Kate's album sleeves, and it's full of pagan and witchcraft imagery and all kinds of esoteric stuff. It puts me in mind of Michael Jackson's Dangerous album, which was a compendium of similar images like this. You can have a field day trying to decipher all that stuff. Then we get into some of the other themes that have been employed in Kate's songs, including the suppression of technology, hidden technology that's kept from the public. And this really came to the fore in the great song that she put out from her Hounds of Love album in 1985, called Cloud Busting. This was all about the work of Wilhelm Reich and his relationship to his son Peter, who wrote a book detailing his father's work, and Kate is said to have drawn on Peter's book as the inspiration for this song and video. So Wilhelm Reich was involved in orgone energy technology, and specifically its applications within weather modification. And he's said to have invented systems that could move clouds around and cause clouds to rain and manipulate the weather in all kinds of ways. Just the type of technology that a sick, psychopathic control system hell-bent on the enslavement of all humanity would love to get its hands on, and seemingly has. So this is a still from the video. The video was shot at another mystical site. It was White Horse Hill in Uffington, Oxfordshire, where you've got this massive effigy of what is said to be a horse carved into the chalk on the hillside. Many people feel that it's not a horse at all, but it's actually designed to depict a dragon. And the site is associated with witchcraft practices and pagans, druids and such. it's somewhere that on the sunrise of the summer solstice you get many druids and many people congregating to see in that sunrise at this site, such is its mystical importance. So the video was filmed there. And we're going into another song now, plus the video, which deals with hidden technology, the suppression of technology from the public, which is weaponized for use by the government. This one is Experiment 4.
I just pray that someone let me
Nice little touch at the end there, we get the Masonic shush sign. Tell no secrets, oaths of allegiance. So Experiment 4 was all about sound technology, sound frequencies that could be weaponized and used to kill. And Kate tells the story of being inducted into this secret military government program where they're developing this technology, and they find that when they start experimenting with it, it actually conjures up demons. These demonic entities appear and they start killing all the scientists. That's what's going on in the video there. So, nice song. Whatever else the themes in Kate's songs are, they're never boring. And she certainly pushes the envelope, as is the case with Experiment 4, which hints at inside knowledge of military-grade sonic weaponry, as she sings of a secret government experiment to use sound and music to cause great harm. Lyrics include, "We were working secretly for the military. Our experiment in sound was nearly ready to begin. We only know in theory what we are doing," that's reassuring. "Music made for pleasure, music made to thrill." So, if there are secret government programs going on to weaponize sound frequencies, you've got to ask yourself how much of that has been put into popular music over the decades, which is then put out there into the general public. The video, directed by Kate, was filmed in a former military hospital near Blackheath, reportedly designed by Florence Nightingale. And the video was banned from Top of the Pops on its 1986 release due to it being considered too intense for a mainstream peak time audience. Can't imagine why. We also have, while we're talking about interesting songs, we also have Breathing, a song written from the point of view of a reincarnated embryo singing from the womb about its fear of entering an outside world ravaged by nuclear war. And again, I'll make the observation that Agadoo it is not. These are very heavy, very complex lyrical themes. And it hints at the songwriter having had access to much knowledge which is occulted from the rest of us, which is only the privilege of certain secret society fraternities, perhaps. More recently, we had a comeback concert from Kate in 2014, a series of shows that she did at Hammersmith Apollo in London. It was her first live show since the early 1980s. That's quite a gap. So she appeared in 2014, and she had guitarists decked out in these strange bird face masks, very similar to the masks that doctors used to wear during the bubonic plague. So I wonder what that could be all about, and what it could perhaps be foreshadowing. This was 2014. The previous year, Kate had picked up a CBE from the Queen, Commander of the British Empire. That's pretty high up. That's above an OBE, it's above an MBE. Only a few get this kind of award. So, if she really was this wildly creative artist who loved expressing herself through music, what the hell is she doing accepting one of these from the Queen? Unless it's the case that she comes from some kind of family background or has some kind of other affiliations which endear her to the establishment, to that whole honours system. That was hugely disappointing to me, to be honest, to get the news that she'd taken the CBE, because I thought better of her. And here she is with seemingly a close personal friend and collaborator, Rolf Harris. Those that were at my talk last night will recall that we got into some details of Rolf Harris. But she recruited Rolf to record Didgeridoo on one of her albums, and then a few years later she got it back to contribute vocals to one of her other albums. And since Rolf Harris got exposed as having been a predatory paedophile, his contributions to that second album have been taken off. So now when you buy new copies of that album, no Rolf vocals. So in conclusion, this is me speculating again, but sometimes you have to do this. Is there enough here to be able to reasonably conclude that Kate emanates from a family background with inside knowledge of hidden elite technology, including trauma-based mind control, that she has revealed many of these secrets through her music in line with the concept of revelation of the method, and that, notwithstanding her obvious extreme talent, her entire career was facilitated for this purpose? What do you think? That's the end of part one. We're going to take a break now. I'm back with 3 more stories for part 2. Hope you've enjoyed it so far, and I hope you'll stick around for the rest. Okay, let's get into part 2 then. Make sure we've got plenty of time for some questions at the end. I really enjoyed presenting part 1 actually, dark and devastating as a lot of the information was, because it's just something new for me to put out there. I've actually been wallowing in all this shit for 11 years now, so I'm a little battle weary. And do any of you know John Heyman, the author? Yeah? I mean, John often complains about how often he's asked to talk about the Titanic or Jack the Ripper. He's like, because, you know, he's an expert on the subject and people want to hear it, but he's done it 200 times, so it starts to get a bit wearing. And I'm a bit like that. People say, you know, oh, what do you think about the Beatles? So it's great to have some new stuff to present. And I hope you found part 1 interesting. If you did, I think you're also going to enjoy part 2, because I've got some great stuff for you here. I want to see some jewels on the floor. Has anyone heard of Somerset Belanoff?
Yes.
A few? So, she's a very mythical figure. Many question whether she even exists, because it's so difficult to get any verifiable, tangible information about her. But according to the information that is available, she's known as the Countess of Wettin and Banbury, which is interesting to me because I live just a few miles from Banbury. And she's said to be a cousin of the Queen, but she's said to be higher up in the hierarchical pecking order of the royals and so-called elites than the Queen. She's said to be able to turn up at Buckingham Palace, or she could when the Queen was still in there, anyway, God knows where she is now, and get an instant audience with the Queen, no appointment necessary. And she's said to be the only individual that held those privileges. This is the only picture that appears to be available of her, if indeed it's her. Couldn't find any other image of her anywhere on the web. She has no Wikipedia profile, there's no official biography, you have to go digging deep. So let's get into some of the information that is available on this very strange and enigmatic figure. Reportedly, Vladimir Putin is said to have commented that she's the most frightening individual that he's ever met. Marianne Faithfull, who was a Rolling Stones associate and a singer, is said to have commented that she's the most beautiful woman that she's ever seen. Oh, Putin, I think the full comment from Putin actually was, there are 3 things he fears in life: Somerset Belanoff, illness and death, in that order. It all reminds me a bit of The Usual Suspects, the film, if anyone's seen that film. And you have the mythical figure of Kaiser Soze, played by Kevin Spacey. But there's speculation within the narrative of the film as to whether Kaiser Soze actually exists, because there's all these myths and all these legends built up around him. But nobody knows whether he's for real or not, or if he's just a subject of legend. And it seems that way with Somerset Belanoff. We have connections into the music industry, which is why this story is relevant, through Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin, well-known occultist, into the works of Aleister Crowley, bought Crowley's house, the Leskin House, on the shores of Loch Ness, which has all kinds of dark legend attached to it. So, second in here is Jimmy Page in his younger years, and this guy here is Peter Grant, who was Led Zeppelin's manager for many years, bit of a legendary figure within the music industry. So this relates to an anecdote that was told to Melody Maker magazine by Peter Grant many years ago, concerning an encounter that the group had with Somerset Belanoff, who is said to have been in a romantic relationship with Jimmy Page for a time. So Peter Grant stated, "One day we all went up to Hampstead where some of Jimmy's Golden Dawn associates had a big old spooky house. Well, we get there and there's this intense feeling of dread and darkness, like pure evil in the house. It didn't seem right to bring a young girl to such a place." He's talking about a young Somerset Belanoff. Her official title, by the way, is a name that goes on forever. It's like 11 names or something. There's no way I'd remember it without having it written down. So the simplest way of expressing her name is Somerset Belanoff. So she was in this relationship with Jimmy Page at the time. And she was very young. She was born, we'll get on to this, but she was born on the 1st of May, 1953. So this would have been the early 70s. She was quite young. And she'd been taken up to this spooky old house in Hampstead by Jimmy Page and Peter Grant. So he says, "Now, these old guys were like real old school evil sorcerers, and straight away they start moving their hands in the air, and you can see Lilibet's, which is Grant's name for Belanoff, chair start to shake. Then one of the guys starts making gestures with his right hand, like a choking motion, and pointing it towards Lilibet's throat. And you can see it's having an effect on her. Then, Lilibet gets a look of complete satisfaction on her face, and she stands up, throws her arms into the air, and at that very moment, everything made of glass explodes. Then, 2 other things happened at the same time. The room became warm again immediately after everything shattered or exploded. He said this was a day in July, and it was very hot, but when they got into the house, there was just a chill in the air and everything just turned freezing cold. So the radio in the corner of the room came on and started playing that song by the Loving Spoonful, "Do You Believe in Magic, A Young Girl's Heart." Then Lilibet gets up, does a little spin and a bow with this innocent smile, and as she leans down over the old sorcerer with the shattered hand and the one with the shattered glass eye, she says, "That, gentlemen, is the way we do it up at Glamis." So she is said to have emanated out of Glamis Castle in Scotland, which is where the Queen Mother's family have their ancestral home. So she's related by blood, so the story goes to the Queen Mother's side of things. So now we get into Led Zeppelin's most famous song, Stairway to Heaven, which has been endlessly analysed over the decades to try and draw meaning from these very enigmatic lyrics, which Robert Plant says that he kind of channeled from out there somewhere. He said he just started writing and the words came to him, and before he knew it, he had the song. So there's a lady who's sure all that glitters is gold, and she's buying a stairway to heaven. When she gets there, she knows if the stores are all closed, with a word she can get what she came for. So supposedly, this is a reference to Somerset Belanoff. She is the lady that appears in the song Stairway to Heaven. And the words, the line with the word she can get what she came for just spoke to her immense wealth and power and influence, that she could get anything she wanted. And then later in the song, we get, and as we wind on down the road, our shadows taller than our soul, there walks a lady we all know, who shines white light and wants to show how everything still turns to gold. So that's a reappearance of this same lady, supposedly Somerset Belanoff, later in the song. Elsewhere in the lyrics, if there's a bustle in your hedgerow, don't be alarmed now. It's just a spring clean for the May Queen. Yes, there are two paths you can go by, but in the long run, there's still time to change the road you're on. So the May Queen is Somerset Belanoff. She was born on the 1st of May, which is Beltane and Spelpurgis Nacht. It's a very important date in the occult calendar, when many rituals get performed. Interestingly, this is also the section of Stairway to Heaven which is associated with a backmasked message, which only makes sense when you play the song backwards. And in this particular song, where the lyrics forward say, if there's a bustle in your hedgerow, don't be alarmed now, it's just a spring clean for the May Queen. When you say it backwards, it comes out sounding like, here's to my sweet Satan, and other references to Satan. I've addressed this in a previous talk, and it's all there in volume 1 of my book as well, breaking down the message that you get when you play this song in reverse. It's the whole concept of backmasking, and it's satanic inversion again, and there appear to be otherworldly forces at play here as well, again going beyond the realms of human planning when it comes to backmasked messages and songs. So in some cases they're placed there deliberately, and the Beatles did a lot of this. John Lennon in an interview commented there were backmasked messages in our songs all the time, we knew what we were doing, all right? So that's when it's done deliberately. But there are other occasions where messages seem to appear when you play a song in reverse, and it appears to be without the music makers or the songwriters' conscious knowledge. I've cited an example in my book of Madonna, right, Dawn? Madonna's Justify My Love has one of these messages in, and it's quite creepy. She's just so this appears to be a very real dynamic, and the May Queen here would appear to be a reference to Somerset Belanoff. This is supposedly a comment that she made to the Reverend Billy Graham. I've met your devil, sir, and frankly I was not impressed. Lucifer is a third-rate demonic entity who relies on his biblical fame in an attempt to hold on to power. The pathetic fool once offered to give me the world on a silver platter in return for my immortal soul. I told him I already have the world, I have the silver platter, and I have no need of his silly trinkets. I told him if he annoyed us further, I would take his eyes out, and he left. I was 13 years old. She's also said to have been very critical of Aleister Crowley. She was not a fan. She thought he was an amateur and a clown, and that he was, again, a second-rate sorcerer and occultist, and she could do much better.
I like this one.
Another connection into the music industry besides Jimmy Page is that she is rumoured to have had an affair with Mark Bolan of T-Rex. Also. She is also said to have been the owner of Bohemian Grove, this redwood forest area in Northern California where all the so-called elites gather once a year, dress up in robes and perform all these rituals and discuss how they're going to enslave and subjugate the rest of humanity for the coming year. So that whole area, Bohemian Grove, is said to have been under the control of the Belanov-Glanis group. And according to this story, as of January this year, the Belanov-Glanis group and Rosebell Industries have sold all interest in the Monte Rio property. Having disposed of our property rights, Glanis hereby ceases to provide any oversight for the property or the activities of Bohemian Grove. Grand Guardian hereby withdraws any support previously provided. Somerset Belanov reportedly has a daughter by the name of Karina Belanov, and she is connected to a venue known as Cannibal Cravings at the Hollydale in California. This is her Twitter profile. It says, daughter of Somerset Belanov, proprietor of Cannibal Cravings at the Hollydale, Elector General, Wettin World Governing Council. So it's either somebody's extended idea of a hoax to create a fake profile for her supposed daughter, or this is very real. There certainly is a venue in Los Angeles known as the Cannibal Club, and it's incredible how they get away with it because they promote on their website that they serve human meat. The website remains, or it did the last time I checked, it doesn't get shut down, and as far as I know, there's been no police investigation into the Cannibal Club of LA. So, how it's able to continue speaks volumes, I guess. So here's an interesting tweet from Karina Belanov, dated January 2020. Kentucky Viper Militia celebrate alliance with Amish Underground Brotherhood by joining us at the Hollydale for the witching event. 8 witches will be eaten for our eternal nourishment. And then later on, the KVM wants to remind everyone that they are not racist and they are pro-government. Yes, they're violent criminals with a taste for cannibalism, but they're behaving themselves tonight. So, somebody's idea of a very sick joke. So, thinking about Somerset Belanov, if she exists, and if she is of royal heritage and extremely high elite stock in terms of the hierarchy of things, and her relationship with Jimmy Page and Mark Bolan, this isn't the first time that somebody of aristocratic stock has been in a relationship with a prominent musician. So a question emerges here: what the hell are these two doing together? Because it's not a natural alliance, it's not what you would consider to be an organic relationship. So one example of this was Panonika Rothschild, who we see here on the left, known socially as Nika. And she was in a relationship with the jazz musician Thelonious Monk, who we see here. So what the hell was a jazz musician doing with a Rothschild? As I say, it's not the kind of relationship you would expect to blossom naturally. And just as an aside, here's an interesting record sleeve from Thelonious Monk, where you have many different versions of him all together in this mirrored type image. And to me, with what I've come to learn about symbolism, this represents, again, trauma-based mind control and the shattering of the mind into many different personas and alters, which I suspect is what was going on with Thelonious Monk, possibly at the hands of Panonika Rothschild. And a more recent example would be the rapper Jay Electronica, very enigmatic figure. He was signed to Jay-Z's Rock Nation imprint a few years ago. We see him here on the left. And on the right is his romantic interest of a few years ago. They've since split, but that's Kate Rothschild, again, of the Rothschild banking family dynasty. So the question re-emerges, what the hell is a rapper doing with a Rothschild heiress? So that's the end of that one. Let's move on to the next story. This is a bit like one of those old horror compendiums that you used to get, where there's like 4 or 5 stories and, you know, they're all, what do you call them, vignettes, and then you move on to the next one. Okay, so anyone know what this is? It's Hebrew. So it's a sweatshirt with Hebrew lettering, and supposedly, I don't decipher Hebrew myself, but supposedly it says Culture Club, who are the subject of this vignette. We're specifically looking at the video to their breakthrough single, Do You Really Want to Hurt Me, which came out in 1982. And we're concentrating on the video to this song. Has anyone seen a breakdown or an analysis of this video before, just out of interest? Okay, great, it's new to everyone. So the video starts out in a courtroom, which looks very Masonic in terms of the decor. The jury are all in blackface, which is something you never get away with now, in the woke era. This was 1982, and it came in the wake of the black and white minstrel show and El Jolson and all these other expressions of blackfacing, but it obviously would be very controversial these days. And then Boy George appears in the dock, being tried for his crimes. He's got a Jewish rabbi's hat on. The seat of the judge looks very Masonic as well. It's got a Masonic arch there. So let's get into the video. It's very strange, but the captions tell you a lot. It's all about the captions. Oh, actually, the video isn't ready yet. You can tell I've not done this presentation before, can't you? The video is a couple of slides on. Before we get into it, this was Boy George's appearance on Top of the Pops when that single was first released. And you can see he's rocking that gown, which has the Hebrew lettering saying Culture Club. So what's the obsession with Hebrew? So, muddying the waters yet further, this is an excerpt from the new book. In 2007, George publicly criticised fellow pop star Madonna's, embracing of the Jewish mystery school tradition of Kabbalah, stating that the faith is intolerant of gay and lesbian relationships. He had previously described Madonna as a vile, hideous, horrible human being with no redeeming qualities. I do wish he'd get off the fence and just say what he means. George's father is said to have been physically abusive towards his wife. George himself described him as a terrible father and a terrible husband. In 1995, George's younger brother Gerald, who suffers from schizophrenia, was convicted of killing his wife. After years of heavy drug addiction, George himself was convicted in New York of the assault and false imprisonment of a male escort, who he was said to have handcuffed to a radiator and beat with a metal chain. Just a bit of background for you there. Okay. So here's the video, and pay attention to the captions. This is the first part.
Do you really want to hurt me? Do you really want to make me cry? Precious kisses, words that burn me. Love never asked you why. In my heart the fire is burning. Choose my color, find the stars. Precious people always tell me that's the step I stand too far.
So for some reason, that section of the video was set in 1936 in a venue called the Gargoyle Club in Soho, London. Interesting venue. It was founded in the 1730s by a socialite and politician of the time, and it became a hangout spot for, you know, socialites of the era, politicians and high-ranking celebrities and such, and, you know, high members of aristocracy. It still survives to this day, and in the 1970s it became a club called Billy's, which is a very famous music club. And it spawned a lot of the early new romantic artists of the time who went on to frequent the Blitz Club in Covent Garden. And that was the birth of the whole new romantic movement of which Boy George was a part. He was said to have been an attendant in the cloakroom at the Blitz Club. And he wore all his extravagant makeup and costumes and such. And it was suggested by his friends that he would become a pop star off the back of the fame that he built up at the Blitz Club. That's the story as to how he got started. So Billy's was this music club that became very notorious in the late 70s and early 80s. It was quite a rough spot, lots of fights would break out there. And in the basement of the venue, you had another music club called Gossips, which was a nightclub. And an interesting thing about that is that a young Tim Westwood, the hip-hop DJ, started out at Gossips as a glass collector, and he was a warm-up DJ for David Rodigan, reggae DJ, and Steve Walsh. So that's a bit of background as to this particular venue, the Gargoyle Club, and for some reason they chose to base that part of the video there. Now the second part of the video is more revealing, so let's take a look at this.
Words I feel I have spoken, I could waste 1,000 years, wrapped in sorrow words I told you, couldn't find and catch my tears. You've been talking about the
Dolphin Square, Pimlico, London. I'm sure many of you know where we're going with this. So Dolphin Square in London's Pimlico has hit the headlines of recent years in connection with paedophilia. Why do all these stories circle back to paedophilia? Flats and apartments there are owned or rented by prominent MPs, and many have been implicated in accusations of child rape on site. Scotland Yard confirmed in 2014 that they launched a murder investigation connected to allegations of child sex abuse dating back to the 1970s and 1980s, involving 3 paedophile MPs and centred around flats in Dolphin Square. Among the politicians to have attended parties there were Margaret Thatcher's former Home Secretary, Baron Leon Britton. It was also implicated, incidentally, with the Elm Guest House in Barnes, London, which is this spot where celebrities and famous people would gather, and a lot of paedophilic activity took place there. One of the visitors to Elm Guest House is said to have been, allegedly, Cliff Richard, who used the name Kitty when he checked in. Jimmy Savile was a visitor there, but why would we be surprised about that? And apparently Leon Britton used to attend as well. So for some reason, the director of this video and the group themselves or whoever handles them felt to base that section in Dolphin Square, of all places it could have been. I was put onto this video by John Wedger, incidentally, the police whistleblower, if anyone's familiar with him. He sent me an email one day and said, look at Culture Club's Do You Really Want to Hurt Me video. It was pretty obvious where it was going with. So, all these factors considered then, the question has to be asked, was the viewing public getting subtle clues as to the world of child sexual abuse at the hands of the world's elite through this enigmatic pop video? Another expression of placing the truth in plain sight, even though virtually nobody in 1982 would have been able to identify it as such. And could it have been hinting that George himself had been subject to such abuse in his younger years? Indeed, could this in fact explain the origin of the boy tag in his artist name, Boy George? Particularly considering that the song includes lyrics such as, this boy loves without a reason, precious kisses, words that burn me, lovers never ask you why, and wrapped in sorrow, words are token, come inside and catch my tears. Food for thought. And it's just amazing to me how we're putting new perspectives on things that have been around for decades. Music videos, artists, record sleeves. It's been right there in plain sight for all this time. I mean, look at Savile. He was getting away with his crimes for the best part of 50 years. We know all about it now, but even as recently as 10 years ago, because the story didn't break till 2012. Nobody had any clue. Might have had their suspicions, but no confirmation of what he was really all about. And it's just amazing to me now that in this era of truth discovery and truth revelation, we're able to look at all this stuff and comprehend it properly for the first time. We are living in amazing times, aren't we? I mean, I get down and discouraged by what's going on in the world, but at the same time, we are very privileged to be the generation that is able to understand all this stuff properly for the first time. Largely as a result of the internet, of being able to do that kind of research for ourselves. The internet is a gift and a curse, but it has benefited us in huge ways, because I wouldn't have done any of this research if it wasn't for the internet and being able to dig around on it. So it is amazing, all this stuff that we can uncover now. Which segues nicely into our final vignette. So I've exposed and gone into the true nature of a lot of groups over the years. You know, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Doors, all of these. And I've been asked a few times, is there anything suspicious that we should know about ABBA? Is there anything nefarious? Is there anything wrong with ABBA? And for many years, because I hadn't... Have I missed a joke? What have I missed? Another favourite of yours, isn't it? I'm not picking on you, really. So, ABBA. A lot of people have asked me what there is to know about ABBA, and for many years I commented that, no, I don't think there's anything there, you know, because I hadn't looked into them. But I have now, and there's a few things there. And quite simply, ABBA would not have enjoyed the career that they have if they hadn't signed over their souls and, you know, become a part of the industry machine. You just don't get that kind of career on your own terms. You know, it doesn't work like that. So here's ABBA, the album sleeve, where we've got shaded faces. So we've got half their faces in shadow, which is a similar effect to what we had on the With the Beatles album. And what that seems to be symbolising is the embracing of their shadow self, the ego, the left-brained egoic self, and embracing that over and above the higher-minded spiritual side. So going back to the roots of ABBA, both Benny and Bjorn were in groups previously before they formed ABBA in the 1960s. So Bjorn, second in here, was a part of the Hootenanny Singers. That suggests links to Scotland, and my mind always goes to links to the Scottish rites of Freemasonry, but then it would, wouldn't it? So I wonder if there could be a link there. Speculative, of course. Top left here, we have a young Benny, pre-beard, and he was a part of a group in the 1960s called the Hempstars. So getting into the formation of ABBA in the 1970s, first off, the group's name contains some word magic. In Hebrew, the word means father, and the reversibility of it has overtones of the adepts of Aleister Crowley's Thelema philosophy, training themselves to read backwards. The group's Eurovision Song Contest winning breakthrough hit Waterloo has Masonic overtones given Napoleon's Freemasonry. The Waterloo event has also become infamous as far as the Rothschild banking dynasty is concerned. We should have a drinking game where every time I mention the Rothschilds, you take a swig. Given that Nathan Mayer Rothschild is said to have learned early through his own personal couriers of Napoleon's defeat and used his unfair advantage to bid on the London Stock Exchange and make himself a fortune. And there they are, rocking the latest fashions of the time in 1974 as they won the Eurovision Song Contest. And that's what put ABBA on the map, and it started off this string of hugely successful hits for many years. So, was it engineered for them to win that contest in order to propel them into the public spotlight? We can only wonder. By the time 1976 had come around, ABBA had put out arguably their best-known single, Dancing Queen, Still gets played in cheesy discos and weddings and bar mitzvahs to this day. And the song was said to be all about Sylvia, who was the new bride of the King of Sweden. She was the dancing queen in question. The lyrics all refer to her. So the girls from ABBA were recruited to perform the song at, I think it was the crowning ceremony of the new Queen of Sweden. And then years later, Anna-Frid from ABBA was recalled, I think this was 1993, to perform at the 50th birthday party of Queen Sylvia of Sweden. So we've got connections there into Swedish royalty. And does any old band get to perform in their presence and get an audience with them, or do you have to be a part of the club to get that close to these people? Okay, video time again. This is ABBA's song, Does Your Mother Know? Notable in that the male members of the group are singing this. They don't usually sing, it's just the girls, but you hear the male members singing this song, and it's probably worth paying a bit of attention to the lyrics, which can go over your head. It's one of these songs you hear on the radio, you might sing along to it, but you don't really notice what the song is actually saying. So if we actually think about it, we get some interesting things.
You're so hot, teasing me, so you're blue, but I can't take a chance on a chick like you. Something I couldn't do. There's that look in your eye, I can read in your face that your feelings are driving you wild. Oh, you're only a child.
So there's the killer line at the end, you're only a child. So you've got this scenario in a nightclub where this girl is coming on to an older guy and he's interested, you know, he's finding himself aroused and he's getting seduced. But then his conscience kicks in and he says, but you're only a child. So he kind of wants to go there, but he knows it's wrong. So we're back to that same old subject again, aren't we? Which they touched on in that song. And like I say, it's lyrical content that could go over your head until you actually examine what's being discussed there. When it comes to Anna-Frid, there was a story which emerged a few years ago regarding her father, who was a member of the German Nazi Party, who occupied Norway during World War II and in the post-World War II years. So Anna-Frid is actually Norwegian-born, and her mother had a brief dalliance with a Nazi soldier. And this emerged and got into the mainstream press a few years ago, and you know, people found it interesting. Sleeves, symbolism. On the voulez-vous sleeve, they're standing in a pyramid with all the connotations that has with the Illuminati in inverted commas and you know, the power structure that controls the music industry. You tend to find that those artists who are the most controlled, the most in the pocket of the industry's handlers, display this kind of symbolism. You get the 666 sign, you get the one eye, you get the pyramids. After ABBA's breakup in 1983, Bjorn and Benny went on to pick up countless awards and merits, both from the record industry and from aspects of the Swedish government and academia, cementing their position as darlings of the establishment. They began writing musicals, one being Chess, with that game's obvious ties to occultism and Freemasonry through the black and white checkerboard symbolism. Prior to the formation of ABBA, Bjorn and Benny were in a Swedish group called the Hootenanny Singers, as I mentioned earlier, an obvious Scottish-sounding name, so that's just what I mentioned in the previous part. And here's how ABBA are looking these days. Do you think Bjorn might dye his hair? Just a thought. All in their 70s now. And you may have heard they've recently reformed. And they put out a new album, Voyage, along with a new single. Things seemed very final in 1983 when they called a halt to the group and they put out the single Thank You for the Music, which was putting the lid on the whole legend of ABBA. And nobody really expected them to reform. Again, especially after all these years, especially at their point in life. It's been nearly 40 years now. But they have. And why could that be? some speculation in the book, and it is only speculation, but it's my conspiratorial mind going into overdrive again. We've had a situation in Australia recently where there's been, at last, resistance, fight back, opposition to the absolute tyranny and totalitarianism that's being unloaded in that country. People are rising up. I think there's a big demo today in Melbourne. Got to find out how that went. But people are finally pushing back against what's being done to them. And this has been building for some time. We had the blockade by the truckers a few weeks ago of distribution centres and ports and places like that. So this has been bubbling away for quite a few months and quite a few weeks now. So right in the midst of all of this, we get the reformation of ABBA coming with a new album. The important factor here is that ABBA are absolutely loved by the Australian nation. In the 1970s, they did a lot of tours there. They really endeared themselves to the Australian public. They shifted shitloads of records, and they were just very, very popular in Australia. Most loved by Australians, more than any other nation. Is it possible that ABBA were instructed to reform to provide some distraction from all the political stuff that was going on in Australia, so that instead of looking at all this resistance and all this fight back to tyranny, many people could be coerced into saying, look, ABBA have reformed, isn't it great? Don't look over there, look over here. ABBA have got a new album. I wonder if that could be the case. We can only speculate on it, but it's one possible explanation for why the group would reform after so many years. That's pretty much it for this presentation. Everything that I've talked to you about today is going to be in the new book, which is going to be out in about 2 weeks. I've had to pull out all the stops. There's been lots of obstacles to overcome, but I reckon it's going to be out the first or second week of December. Can't wait for it to drop. This is the first time anyone's heard any of the content from the new book in terms of sound bites. So I hope you found it interesting, and thanks for listening. Speaking of books, let me just mention this one. An eBay Life for Me, Tips and Advice on How to Sell by Dawn Wilkinson. Her first book. I remember how exciting it was to get the first copy of my first book, so it's a very momentous time. So this is Dawn's book. Just wanted to mention it. If you feel like getting a copy, they'll be available soon, I guess. But well done.
We'll have questions and answers, if that's okay, Mark. But at first, I'd like to give Mark a little present, because we love to give our speakers presents. He got presents last night, got some more for him. So I don't know if you've heard of the Art of War. There you go. That's for you. And another Beatles book, because we know you love the Beatles. That's for you, Mark.
Oh, thank you.
I'll take your collection.
Right, yeah.
Right, thanks ever so much for coming to talk to Trisica's North East.
Okay.
One last thing, Mark. Just one last thing before we do the raffle, and obviously we'll have a bit of time if you want to look at Mark's books and probably get your picture taken with Mark. That's okay. So, for the benefit of people who weren't at the talk last night, my daughter wrote this lovely poem, our first poem ever for Mark. So, to his embarrassment, I'm going to read it because she's too shy. Well, what can I say about our Mark? He exposed the music world, it's all so dark. He tells it like it is, it's really quite sick, this music biz. With special thanks to Passio and Ike for whetting our Mark's appetite. To get to the truth on the side of good, he can't be stopped, it's in his blood. Truth, freedom, justice, love, a special message sent from above. To expose the dark and end the lies, to bring down the people we simply despise. What a year it's been, unbelievable to see, when The Walking Dead became a reality. These shit show actors, I do not wish to dwell. We all know those bastards are going to hell. This whole scam is falling apart, It's all been exposed, they're not very smart. You chose this path, you've got a job to do, and always remember, we will come through. And one last thing to stay on your mind, Truth Seekers North East will always love you.
How embarrassing. Much appreciated. I call Maureen my second mother. She looks after me better than me first. I always come away with a bag full of goodies. Anyway, thanks for listening again and books over you. Sorry, happy time.